Good morning, children. Today we'll be beginning with the next chapter in our syllabus, that is the food and beverage service. And food and beverage, as you can make out from the name, includes not only food but even the different types of beverages that are served in a hotel, like tea, coffee, wine, etc. So regarding this service and when to serve it, how to serve it, is what we are going to study in this chapter. So to keep in mind, we have different types of meals in a day. We begin the day with breakfast, followed sometimes by a mid-morning snack. Then afternoon, that is after 12, between 2 to 3 o'clock, we generally have lunch, followed by tea and snacks or high tea. If somebody has skipped lunch, can go for high tea. Then after that, if needed, you have dinner or supper. So let us quickly see the different meals that a person has in the whole day, and what are the timings and what sort of food is served during the different meal times. So what we find is that here, traditionally, in every country of the world, we find that the day begins with breakfast. And breakfast menu, as the name comes, breakfast, as you can come, the name itself says that since it is after long duration, we have slept through the night, we have not eaten anything. So breakfast has to be a full meal. A full meal in what sense? Nutrition. It has to provide the body with enough carbohydrates and proteins so that we can begin the day. So generally a standard breakfast menu, if we go for the continental one, which is served in most of the restaurants all over the world, it will include not too heavy but nutritious. So generally it includes fruit juice, certain types of cereals, like what cereals would go in for, like these days we go in for oats, dalia, bread, some form of cereals. And if the person is a non-vegetarian, he can order for eggs, sausages, ham, and there are different choices of breads accompanying it. And the bread is generally accompanied with jam, jellies, and there is a beverage served. And what is the beverage served within the breakfast menu? Either tea or coffee. But it's a quick service menu. We don't waste a lot of time in having breakfast. Many people, they can substitute the fruit juice with chunks of food too. So breakfast is a nutritious meal because we begin the day after not eaten for a long time. So the breakfast menu must include enough carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and it should be filling but not heavy, because the person or the child is going to school, so he doesn't want to leave with a heavy stomach. And this was a continental menu. But when we talk about India, we find that in many regions of the country, people may begin their breakfast with idli sambar, dosa, which are light but filling and nutritious. Or they may opt for, like North India, people may opt for parathas, stuffed parathas. Or we find that certain places, like in the western states of India, like Maharashtra, we find that people generally opt for poha. So all said and done, the breakfast should be a nutritious meal, but not too heavy. Then followed by that, we find that people go for lunch. And the lunch menu definitely is an elaborate meal. Here, what we find is that many people may prefer a light lunch menu if they are at work, but generally what we find is that most of the time in restaurants and all, a lunch menu either at home or in a restaurant, would definitely include an appetizer, which may be hot or cold, a soup, then entree. Entree means a main dish, which can be either veg or non-veg. If it is non-veg, it will include fish, poultry, lamb. There will be a starch item like rice, chapatis, bread, pasta, if it is a continental meal. Vegetable, a form of vegetable, either dry, curried, and it is mostly accompanying the main dish, and it will be cooked according to what we have ordered. Rice, parathas, pastas, according to that the vegetable will be cooked. And lastly, it will be followed by a sweet, that is the dessert, ice creams, cakes, or if it's an Indian meal, then it may include halwas, rasgulla, etc. So the lunch menu is quite an elaborate menu. People eat a good meal during lunchtime. But many a times what we find is that some people may skip breakfast and lunch and come out with a mid-morning meal which we call as brunch. So brunch also is a mixture of items which may have been served for breakfast or for lunch, and that will be included in the brunch menu, which will be filling enough for the person so that he doesn't feel hungry till tea time. So that's a brunch menu. So lunch menu, once again I repeat, has to be elaborate, must have an appetizer, which could be a fruit or vegetables or seafood. The appetizer could be made out of that. Salad, some places they serve you a good salad like Caesar salad. Then, as I said, it was followed by soups. Then the main dish, which we call as entree, which may be both maybe veg or non-veg, along with a starch item, that is rice, bread, pastas. Then vegetables cooked according to the according to the starchy food that is being served, rice, khichdi, chapatis, pastas, according to that. Lastly, there will be a sweet dish, that is the dessert. So this is generally how the menu is grouped for lunchtime. Followed by that, we have tea time. Tea time is not so important in India because generally in India we just have simple tea and a few biscuits or a sandwich. But what we find is that the English have made it very elaborate. Tea time for them is very elaborate because during tea time they include sandwiches made out of egg, chicken, cheese. After spreading the bread, or they may have bread with butter, jam, honey, pastries like scones, donuts. So in this way, what we find is that the English have, since they have made tea time so elaborate, sometimes we also call it high tea. High tea means when the tea time is elaborate and doesn't just serve simple tea and biscuits. So high tea is another. Many a times we may invite a guest for high tea. Then we find that we make it a very elaborate affair so that the person need not have dinner. So high tea will suffice in such a manner that it's so heavy that the person may not need to have a dinner after that. But if a person goes for dinner, then what is it that he is served? Most of the time we find that guests are entertained either in the hotel or at home when they're invited for dinner. So dinner generally accompanies an alcoholic drink, and we find that dinner menu in most of it's a very specialty menu, and expensive items are included for dinner, like appetizers. And what we find is that here again the same, similar to lunch, but a more elaborate and expensive menu is chosen for dinner. Appetizers, soups, main dish or entree, a starch item, vegetables, desserts, And for beverage, like I said, alcoholic beverage is preferred during dinner time. But usually what we find is that in many places, when people go for work and come home, they may have an early dinner that is around 5, 6 o'clock straight after they come home, which may not be that elaborate, which we have in a hotel. Then in that case, they may feel hungry at night. So we have a supper menu. The supper is generally had in the European continents, where people come straight from work and have dinner, a light dinner. So what we find is that it is some sort of a filler between a early evening supper, which may include a soup or maybe a dessert with vegetables. So what we find is that many a times people may have late night supper where they can opt for sandwich and fruits. So this concept is mostly European, the idea of having supper. But in the Indian context, we say that generally we go for 3 major meals in a day: breakfast, lunch, simple tea with maybe a light snack, followed by dinner, which is generally late in the evenings. But if we follow the European continent or the European style of food items, then in that case we find that since they have early dinner or skip dinner, they generally go for a light or heavy supper in late evening. So these are the different meal times or the different types of meals which is had during different times in a day. And as I have just explained to you, the menu is also different for each meal. Now, next we come to what is a menu. Menu, we can say, will include those items generally in a hotel which should fulfill the expectation of the guests. Because when you go, a person first sees what type of a menu is there in the hotel. Then he starts making a choice, whether to go for Chinese, continental, or something regional. And this is generally influenced mostly, or this idea of menu has generally come in from the Western concept. Then followed by that, the menu that is there, people look at the value or the price, that how much they need to pay for a certain item. And also the socio-economic factors also affect the menu of a hotel. Ethnic factors, religious factors also need to be remembered while planning a menu in a hotel. But when we plan a menu, there has to be a balance of certain things. And what is this balance? Aesthetic balance of the dishes. Meaning the dishes have to be colorful, but at the same time we don't want too many colors at the same time. So the whole platter must look colorful, but too much of color may spoil the meal. For example, if we have orange carrots, we can go with, it will definitely match the white potatoes, green peas, the fried fish or the steamed fish. So in this manner, what we find is that the